Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, last time we've gotten into your personal story before. Last time we didn't really cover it that much at all. But yeah, speaking of doing a bunch of research when there wasn't the internet and trying to put this all together in your own life, when you were a trained, dietitian, nutritionist, from a very prominent school, tell us, remind us a little bit about your story as it relates to oxalate and how you were able to find all this out and all the things that you suffer from.
Right. Well, I didn't really have the big dawning of recognizing the significance of oxalate in my many health problems until right before I turned 50 years old. And in retrospect, as I started to unpack my story and unpack the science and see them line up with me and all the clients I work with and so on, like I've probably been affected by oxalate since I was a fetus. And certainly there's a good chance that it had a role in the fact that I was given penicillin a lot as a young child for strep and that kind of thing. And when I was older, like college age and babysitting, we had a huge epidemic of ear infections in infants and tubes put in and all this sort of thing. So there's this tendency to have childhood infections, and that crowd seems like a great number of people who get super sick with oxalate have had that in childhood. So some of us can be affected for years. And I started having trouble um, around puberty at age 12 with back pain and fatigue and other pains that became arthritic. And during my 20s, I had all this arthritis. And I ended up with foot pain in my between like high school and college. In the first year of college, I started having foot pain in my right foot that blew up into a decade of disability. Crutches, wheelchairs, painkillers, surgery, foot surgery, and then my feet were never quite great to the point where I really couldn't wear heels. I couldn't go barefoot. My feet needed side support. So even just hanging out in the house, I had to wear heels, or not heels, but wear shoes, which were typically Sebago moccasins because they had the nice kind of side walls to hold me together, but not a lot of structure to kind of deform my weak feet. And it turns out that once I got rid of eating sweet potatoes and Swiss chard and foods that had been standard in my life, my feet no longer need shoes. They don't, I can do heels, I can run on pavement. So, I mean, we talk about me um, presenting a ketocon in bare feet is really significant for me to be capable of standing around in bare feet now. And that didn't occur till I was 50 years old.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Remind us also what the family of oxalates, we call them oxalates. It's a few different things. Remind us what those are and where the source of that comes from.
Right. So oxalic acid is this parent compound that's a tiny molecule with two carbons and four oxygens. So heavy oxygen molecule, quite tiny, made by nature. It's a kind of a degenerative product. It can be formed from other things. And so even in a polluted air, acid rain contains oxalic acid. Soils are loaded with oxalic acid and the crystals that are made from it. So crystalline oxalate forms from oxalic acid forming bonds with minerals, especially calcium. So calcium oxalate is considered what we call an insoluble, hard to dissolve molecule that forms crystals, as do all the kind of crystalline salts of oxalate. So oxalate can form crystals with magnesium and heavy metals and all kinds, but calcium is its favorite partner. So calcium oxalate and the crystals that form from it are throughout nature in the soils. Plants make oxalic acid, often from vitamin C first. They make vitamin C, which easily degenerates into oxalic acid, and then they'll build crystals. And when you eat certain plants that do this well or need to for their physiology, you're eating both oxalic acid and calcium oxalate crystals. The crystals are quite mechanically damaging to your mucosal tissues in your mouth and intestinal tract because that's just a single cell of a single wall of, not a wall, but a single lining of cells. Like it's not multi layers of cells susceptible to damage despite mucus production and all that. The crystals are hard like quartz, very irritating and sharp, but the oxalic acid gets into the body just like magnesium or potassium or something that just is water soluble that floats into the bloodstream right between the cells of the intestinal tract. So you're eating oxalic acid that gets in your blood. You're eating crystals that irritate your intestinal tract and what we, the alimentary canal, all the way from your teeth down. Literally, those crystals in the plants can cause dental wear. They call it micro wear and wear down your teeth. That's how hard they are. They're harder than your teeth.
Wow. Wow. I think that's underplayed how that affects the teeth. And I've told you this before, to try to sell somebody on oxalate and what it is. The mechanical side of things is like the least damaging. Like you said, it causes lots of damage. It's mechanical in nature. You typically get rid of it through the digestive tract. To think that the that's the least amount of damage, yet it's like eating glass or sandpaper. I'll have somebody mentally take a piece of raw spinach and chew it up and describe the mouthfeel and explain like, yeah, what you're feeling, the grittiness that you're feeling in on your mouth, in your teeth is oxalate crystals, and that can help like really have somebody like understand what this is like, because I think most people can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. And so the thing is, I wish we could have that feedback. If we had feedback that direct and the openness to it, we would be able to kind of relate to this. But one of the foods that puts in these crystals is kiwi. Kiwi is a lot of these two-sided toothpick shaped little shards. Like the plants make these bundles, like think of it as a quiver full of arrows. They're double pointed arrows. And they like hundreds of them, a couple hundred of them in one little vessel, and then lots of little vessels. And those are concentrated around the seeds of the kiwi. So there's like this blob of kind of pectin that encase seeded areas, and especially in a kiwi.
Yeah.
So that pectin blob kind of is a soft cushion around those vacuoles and that can kind of dull your ability to tell they're there until those break out of that pectin bubble. So it's going to be maybe lower down in your digestive tract where they start being abrasive.
Wow. Okay, well, that's a perfect segue, because I was going to ask you about the acute symptoms of consuming and getting rid of oxalate, and also the chronic symptoms. So can you talk about, like, are there ways that we can tell in the short term that oxalate is becoming problematic, again, either in the consumption or the output of oxalate, and also what are some of the chronic things that can build up over time?
Well, this is the maddening thing. And there's so many things that are sort of ironic and frustrating with oxalate and poisoning because it's very hard to tell when it's your healthy diet making you sick. So somebody might go into like CrossFit and start doing chocolate and almonds and spinach and so on, and trying really hard with these healthy foods, and they cannot figure out why they keep getting worse. And is that because the symptoms are delayed and vague and you just feel loopy and you don't sleep so well and you're getting up to pee and your skin starts itching a little bit and you start getting grumpier and you start getting frustrated and you're trying hard and you're getting more spinach and you can't put it together. So the thing to look for though is bedtime symptoms, pretty common, where you're starting to have things like hiccuping, belching, discouragement, itching, things that come on sort of a circadian way. And bedtime is common because if you're eating, well, some of the foods, and we haven't reviewed them, but you don't have to eat superfoods to get sick with oxalate. You could be a potato person. So if you have like hash browns at McDonald's and then you have like pizza with spinach on it or more French fries or potato chips, like all the box lunches throw in a bag of potato chips, right? Or on the airline, like there's going to be potato chips or even taro chips with root chips or even worse. And so you could do, let's say, peanut butter sandwich, potato chips, and chocolate, and you could be eating a high oxalate diet, right? So that could be like just regular folk doing that. It doesn't have to be the health nuts and nutrition geeks, but either way, that food is got a lag time of absorption where the absorption meaning the oxalic acid gets into your bloodstream and starts messing around with your tissues. So that lag, you get a peak about 4 hours after the meal. So at lunchtime, you get a peak from breakfast. At dinner, you get a peak from lunch. And at bedtime, you get a peak from all three meals because it's still going on 8 or 10 hours later. So you've only had like 12 hours of eating foods, and here you are, three meals adding up at bedtime. So I think looking for problems in the evening or overnight, having to wake up, having to pee a lot, getting times when your bladder's a little crotchety, and causing you to run to the bathroom too many times, or you're heavy peeing, or trouble with peeing, prostatitis, uh, infections, things like sinus infections, yeast infections, or apparent UTIs. These kinds of things can be oxalate related. Tooth sensitivity, problems with either your vision or your hearing, headaches, migraines, mood problems, big time, because this is neurotoxic. So the neurotoxicity can lead to those sensory problems and those mood problems and pain syndromes. It's also destructive to connective tissues. So if you have arthritis and rheumatoid things or itises like tennis elbow, golfer's shoulder, golfer's this or that, like that kind of connective tissue stuff, prolapse something or other. Like that was what was going on with my feet, is that the connective tissue was too soft and not having enough integrity. And so that was probably causing imperceptible spreading, which was causing the pain and the ache in the feet. Once that connective tissue firmed up, because the oxalates weren't there destroying it, I was fine.